ARK Ascended was supposed to be an upgraded version of Evolved, and even though it has improved on certain aspects, it has some severe drawbacks. A lot of changes were made when moving to Unreal Engine 5, both graphically and feature-wise. Wildcard introduced interactive foliage, which adds immersivity. It looks pretty, though for many people is disabled due to performance drops and graphic settings. Interactive water was added. This also adds to the immersivity, and is pretty good looking too, but is also often removed for people due to their graphics settings. This is not the same as the dynamic water I showed in my previous video, but that would have been difficult to implement and would have tanked performance. For people with high spec computers, the game looks incredible, but for those with lower end or even middle tier PCs, the game runs awful. It is almost unplayable and becomes hard to look at. Ascended was supposed to be a graphical improvement, but for most players, looks worse than Evolved. There really should be more options for graphic settings, but that will be discussed more in the performance section. Something that really annoys me is the change in rock textures. I now struggle to tell the difference between normal rocks and metal rocks. In Evolved, setting up water pipes was tedious, so for quality of life, this is a good change, though I know some were annoyed as it made moving water too easy. They also changed the way regular generators work, making it closer to the tech generator. It no longer requires cables, and whilst this makes building easier, it is also unfair, as turret walls used to be able to be disabled by destroying an outlet, but now generators can be easily hidden. The timing they added for the fuel was very useful, and I also like the changes that made it so all electric workbenches run off the generator. It just makes life easier. The upgrade to placing turrets was nice to see, and even though I haven't played PvP, I know it made building a base better, and I've seen some good looking turret towers. Building got a major overhaul, which comes from the creator of the S Plus mod being introduced for the changes. Building in ARK is now fun rather than a required task. People who are new to ARK can now start building without having to figure out very obscure mechanics to make okay looking buildings. When cryopods were released, they introduced a massive nerf. They can now only be deployed in range of a cryofridge that has been powered for 5 minutes. I prefer the change. I think it was too powerful being able to throw out a creature anywhere on the map. However, for PvP, the changes that should have been implemented to support the nerf were not implemented, so now caves are even more powerful than they were in Evolved. They are difficult to raid as most creatures cannot enter them to soak turrets, whereas bases outside can be soaked by any creature. They changed the user interface, and in my opinion there are several negatives to it. The character viewer does not seem to have the correct shading, and therefore looks plasticky and cheap. The blue colours make it feel cheap also, and an easy fix would be the ability to toggle a grey version of it, or even a translucent version like ARK's first user interface. Another gripe I have is the new icon pop-ups, like those on the Shasta. Personally, they feel intrusive and unimmersive, and having the option to put it in line with the stat icons would be a lot better. The Acro is a creature that is supposed to be added to the base game, and the adrenaline bar is too in your face for me. Why can't there be the option to make it more like the Giga Rage bar? On a side note, people are regularly not noticing that they are starving or dying of thirst. The visual effect seems to be lessened and the audio signals too. This is not great and the option to make it louder should be added. ARK's water has never been my favourite environment, but it was nowhere near as bad in Evolved. Large dinosaurs get stuck on the smallest fish. When a horde of megalodons surrounds you, you cannot hit them very well, and they quickly shred your team to pieces. During my island playthrough, I resorted to taming as many megalodons as possible on a raft, and never leaving my water base without more than 3 of them, and hoped they would kill anything that got near me. I've noticed a lot of people complaining about this, and I seriously hope they make it so larger dinosaurs can push smaller ones in water. Wildcard also dramatically increased underwater foliage, which tanks performance. They also made some resource spawns more inconsistent. Water drops received some heavy nerfs, so the best way to gain blueprints is from treasure maps, which require Bob's Tall Tales, or certain cave drops. I personally do not have much experience with PvP on Ascended, but there have been many complaints. Bob's Tall Tales and the pyromane have been incredibly controversial with their overpowered creatures, which I will discuss later. The cryopod nerf has meant that most soakers cannot be brought into caves, which in turn buffs the caves. However, nothing has been done to desensitize cave building, and raiding caves is incredibly difficult. With the introduction of the oasisaur, tribes built outside of caves can place any soaker on an oasisaur and fly them over to a base, making those bases easily raidable. Hackers are also still rampant, and nothing is being done about them. This is likely due to Snail Games hacking on servers themselves, so effective anti-cheat and enforcement cannot be implemented. PvP is a massive side to ARK. It's disappointing to see no improvements. Wildcard's main way of upgrading the maps have been to spam foliage and rocks, and the few changes they have made have been mostly positive, but there are not many good locations to build outside of caves. This will be discussed more in the map redesign section though. ARK Ascended has very low performance for a lot of gamers, with most people having to choose between low frame rate or low quality. A few of the improvements impact the performance by a significant amount. Foliage is one of the worst offenders in gaming due to the high amounts of polygons required for high quality bushes and trees. Wildcard dramatically increased the foliage density, making it so when entering forests, frames drop due to the rendering load. Outside of beaches, frames are cut in half for the majority of players. Fire is one of the most performance reducing effects in Ascended. The impact of this is made even worse with the introduction of the pay to win pyromane. Very little effort has been put into optimisation on launch, and whilst patches have slightly increased performance, it should be significantly better. Recently it has been said that Ascended is being upgraded to Unreal Engine 5.4 over the summer, which comes with a number of upgrades, and whilst this should provide some performance upgrade, I won't hold my breath that it would be significant enough to matter. As far as my experience went, when Ascended first dropped and I flew into the air, the distance would be only mesh, with no trees. When I played last, it seems they have implemented LODs, which are a series of lower quality models that are swapped out when the player gets far enough away from them. This is a good step, but the LODs are unshaded, which makes them look weird at all times of the day. This could be changed so that there are a few models that closely represent the time of day, or even just adding shadow to the model would make it look better. It was discovered very early into release that volumetric clouds were so performance impacting that disabling them gave the game anywhere from 10 to 20 FPS. For me, the clouds look fuzzy and grainy, but the lack of them does make the game feel incomplete. On Scorched Earth, disabling them also disables the sandstorm wall that indicates the weather event. A better alternative to having to disable the clouds would be have a toggle for non-volumetric clouds, like in Evolved. These would be a lot easier to render, but still look good. Certain textures, such as the scope overlay, require the texture setting to be at least high or the image goes blurry. This does not make any sense, as it is simply an image overlay. Separating these textures would dramatically increase the quality of the game for those with lower end hardware, as currently menu items go blurry when they should be prioritised. Another example of this is the shastasaurus, which on anything below the epic texture setting becomes a polygony mess. This is likely a PC skill issue, but could still be changed to prioritise certain textures. Decreasing settings drastically decreases the quality of the game. Either the shading is non-existent or taking all my frames. Whilst it is a tall order to have a secondary shading method, having a less demanding one would allow the game to look a lot better whilst also providing performance. The same goes for all of the settings, either it is too performance reducing or incredibly low quality. Wildcard have added a few new dinosaurs to the base game. In this section I will discuss the free ones, and in the paid DLC section I will discuss the purchasable ones. The Gigantoraptor was supposed to release with Ragnarok, but as it was made first due to its vote being done first, and the fact that the center was delayed, it was released early. Personally, I hope for it to be removed on all maps excluding Ragnarok when that map releases. The creature vote should be exclusive to that map in my opinion. The design for the Gigantoraptor is pretty good. The taming method is quite unique and one of Wildcard's better implementations. I think that the bonding buff is partially useless, especially for PvP, as most people do not want to take Gigantoraptors to fights, and would prefer the Uranus. I do think a speed decrease would benefit it, as currently it is far too fast compared to most creatures. That combined with its abilities make it too strong. The Fasola is a good looking creature, but its implementation sucks. The taming is awful, requiring strong rocks to deal any amount of torpor. The Fasola does not spawn close to these rocks, and they are also near hard surfaces which unburrow the Fasola, bearing in mind that the controls for sand swimming suck. Taming a Fasola is a painstakingly slow effort, and for very little reward. The armor debuff ability is nice, but there isn't too much else to the creature. It is not good enough at farming for it to be better than the Yankee. It's a disappointing implementation, given the concept when voting for it. The shastasaurus is a massive whale, and the final design for it is well made. The taming method is good, using a dolphin to distract it is cool, and in comparison to the Fasola, is a fun time. It is disappointing that a primitive version of the saddle was not included, as a lot of players prefer not to use tech, and making a saddle texture wouldn't have been a significant effort. Wildcard were not able to fully realise the design for the compartment saddle due to edge cases with land planes. and whilst I cannot blame them for not being able to implement that, as reworking how they interact would essentially be an overhaul of the physics, the new design is a bit goofy. I believe that the Shasta is too complex with too many abilities. It currently has the Sonic Blast, Flashbang, Sonar Pulse, Torpedoes and a Periscope. I think that removing the Sonar Pulse and Flashbang would make the Shasta a better team, as the Sonar is not overly useful and the Flashbang is both situational and not necessary. Overall, it is one of Wildcard's best additions. The creator of the ARK Editions creatures has announced that 10 of his creatures are being added to the base game, 2 of which have been added at the time of making this video. Whilst I have not used the 2 added dinos much, the Sivactinus is an interesting looking creature and is a simple knockout team. It is nice to see some more water creatures. The Cerator is essentially a Carno with a few extra abilities. It is a well designed dinosaur, and again it is nice to see more additions to the base game. The other ARK Editions dinosaurs are Acrocanthosaurus, Archelion, Brachiosaurus, Concavenator, Cryolophosaurus, Helicoprion, Dinosuchus, Dinotherium. Personally, I am most excited for the Acro, Helicoprion and Dinosuchus. ARK Ascended was originally a free upgrade to the base game, then it was to be sold alongside ARK 2, but DLC maps would have to be rebought. Then it became a standalone product that everything aside for a single map would be free. This was not true, as Bob's Tall Tales and Fantastic Tames are paid for. On the announcement of Bob's Tall Tales, I was quite unhappy. I could have understood if it was a separated mod or standalone servers, but everyone having to deal with the additions is not great. Before I go any further, I would like to say I did not pay for Tall Tales, I won it in a giveaway. The trains were an interesting addition, and it justified the overhaul of vehicle physics in ARK, which affected the RAF. This sort of deal is going to occur more and more in gaming, as features post-release must be monetarily justified. The trains being single way mean that double the tracks must be used, more of annoyance but still. It is clearly a PvE feature due to the high price of tracks and lack of utility, but it is cool regardless. I think that the skin and cosmetic structure aspect of Tall Tales is good, and should be continued as it is clear that Wildcard and Snell need more funding. I would rather buy into cosmetics than features. Items such as the windmill, poker table and more are great for not affecting those without the pack, but providing a worthwhile product to those who do choose to purchase it. The oasisaur is bad, it does not fit the theme of the harsh wasteland at all. It is a safe haven that can fly at will, does not require significant effort to tame, and can revive dead creatures and is incredible in raids. Part of the ARK experience is losing tames you care about. Death brings meaning to life. Whilst it isn't too overpowered, it still doesn't fit. The PvP utility is too large as it can carry large creatures to pillar bases, furthering the gap between caves and land bases. I would have preferred if the oasisaur was removed from the pack, as that would be more fair. I still do not think it fits Scorched Earth and would have preferred for it not to be added. Adding paid for creatures that are easy to tame and almost vital in PvP is bad practice. Clear cut pay to win. The pyromane is the worst of the 2 offending creatures, however. It is the Shadowmane with a little makeover for £5. It looks cool, but it does not fit the centre. It has a ridiculous amount of features, being able to light nearby campfires, being a shoulder pet that acts as a flamethrower, being able to turn meat into jerky, at a press of a button will transform and is incredibly quick, and can teleport. It is essentially a paid for get out of jail free card. I desperately hope that they halt production of fantastic teams. I and the majority of players would be much more willing to pay for skins than creatures and structures. The very least Wildcard should do is allow for players who gain access to a tamed pyromane to be able to use it, regardless of if they have bought it, and leaving taming to those who have bought it. This is because raiding a tribe and gaining pyromanes is currently useless. There also should be the option to prevent it spawning in single player. There are mods to remove these 2 dinosaurs. I suggest every server use it until they walk back the pay to win aspects. The island was given a nice facelift. The area in the south zone is a lot nicer. It is disappointing that certain areas were not given a revamp, though it is an acceptable improvement. Wildcard did just spam foliage everywhere, which is disappointing. I think a reduction of the density by 30 to 50% would make every map a lot better. In certain areas there was a dramatic increase in foliage and performance dropped significantly. The terrain feels more populated, and whilst it does give it a more realistic look, it can be annoying to traverse. Somewhere in between Evolved and Ascended would be better. The resource of polymer is still lackluster, with the best option being baby penguins. They should have added other ways to farm it, such as underwater or cave nodes. They could have also made a creature farm polymer more efficiently. Scorched Earth felt underdeveloped in ASE. This is still the case in ASA. It has had a few improvements, but it's still one of their weaker maps. The massacre of the church cave is one example of Wildcard stripping the personality of structures in Ascended. It looked great in ASE, but it is now a box. The weather effect of the sandstorm is incredible. The imposing wall of dust is an amazing sight. In a lot of areas, the foliage density has been massively increased, which doesn't fit the theme and tanks performance. Black pearls are still incredibly scarce, and it is disappointing to see it was not improved. The centre's upgrade was disappointing. The palette used to be grey and green, the overhaul has dehydrated all of the rocks. The centre feels more like an island copy than ever. It is almost like they used the Scorched Earth assets by mistake. Again, the foliage density ruins performance, and the redwoods were not done very well, and it is sad to see. The volcanic islands were done so incredibly dirty it pains me to see it. All of its personality was stripped, going from a unique charred wasteland to an island identical to those which surround it. The only difference are the pools of lava. It has suffered from the foliage spam the same as the rest of the map. The charcoal trees were one of my favourite places to farm charcoal, as I did not like waiting for furnaces to cook them. It was a fun way to gain that resource, and it makes me worried that Ragnarok will have the same treatment. The addition of the pyromane to the area sucks. The entire vibe has been diminished, and it is sad. The pyromane would have fit way better in the original area. The ice fortress looks bad. So many mesh holes the size of a titanosaur. Places in the water where the effect disappears, and in some areas it looks completely unfinished. I'm really disappointed with it. The direction Ascended took with the upgrade was quite disappointing. Whilst the game looks incredible, the sacrifice of performance means that not many players can comfortably play it. If suitable settings had been implemented, it would have been done a lot better. The pay to win aspects is such a disappointment, and the lack of improvement PvP wise has caused a split in the player base. I plan to make a video covering what I feel would improve the game. If you have any ideas or want to discuss anything, please feel free to do it in the comments.